In 1913, a curious event unfolded that captivated minds around the world. It was the time when spiritualism, an interest in contacting the spirits of the dead, was at its peak. People sought answers from the beyond, hoping to connect with loved ones who had passed away. In the midst of this, a St. Louis woman named Pearl Curran stumbled upon something that no one could explain, a connection with a spirit who called herself Patience Worth. Pearl Lenore Curran was an ordinary woman by most accounts. Born in 1883 in Mound City, Illinois, she lived a quiet life and was not particularly known for having any special talents. Pearl had dropped out of school at a young age, married a man named John Curran, and settled into the routine life of a housewife. She had little interest in spiritual matters and, by her own admission, was not someone who read extensively or possessed much knowledge of history or literature. In fact, Pearl had never even heard of Patience Worth before the events that followed. Pearl's introduction to the world of the supernatural came quite by accident. One day, while visiting a friend who had a fascination with spiritualism, Pearl reluctantly agreed to participate in a séance. They used a Ouija board, a popular tool at the time for attempting to communicate with spirits. Pearl had little faith in its effectiveness and treated the session more as a joke than anything else. However, that would soon change. As Pearl's hand rested on the planchette, the small wooden pointer that moved across the letters on the Ouija board, it began to move, seemingly guided by an unseen force. The pointer began spelling out words, and to everyone's surprise, a name emerged: Patience Worth. When asked who Patience was, the board replied, "I was once a maiden fair and young, in distant lands and time. I now come again, as Patience Worth." Curiosity quickly turned into astonishment as the messages continued. Through the Ouija board, Patience Worth began to describe herself as a woman who lived in 17th century England. She claimed to have lived during a time of hardship, when plagues and religious turmoil plagued the land. According to Patience, she had died long ago, but her spirit lingered, and she had now found a voice through Pearl. At first, Pearl thought it was just her subconscious playing tricks on her. However, the words that came through were far too complex and detailed to be something she had made up. Pearl was a woman of limited education and certainly not someone capable of producing intricate literary work, let alone creating entire stories set in a distant past. Yet, through the Ouija board, Patience Worth began dictating poems, stories, and even novels, all written in a style that seemed more fitting for the 1600s than the 20th century. The most incredible part was that these writings were not only historically accurate, but also filled with vivid descriptions of life in the 17th century, a time and place Pearl knew nothing about. Patience's words spoke of old English customs, religious conflicts, and the daily struggles of life in a world very different from Pearl's own. The voice of Patience was strong, witty, and eloquent, displaying a command of the English language that astounded scholars and writers alike. As news of the case spread, people became increasingly fascinated by the mystery of Patience Worth. Was this truly the spirit of a long-dead woman, or was Pearl somehow accessing knowledge she didn't know she possessed? Skeptics and believers alike began flocking to Pearl's home to witness the phenomenon firsthand. They wanted to see if there was any trickery involved, but no one could explain how the messages were being produced. Soon, Pearl no longer needed the Ouija board to communicate with Patience. The connection between them became so strong that the words seemed to flow effortlessly from Pearl's mind. She would sit in her parlor, often with friends and reporters present, and speak in the voice of Patience. Sometimes, she would even transcribe Patience's words by hand, filling page after page with stories and poems that seemed to come from another era. One of the most remarkable aspects of the case was the sheer volume of material Patience produced. Over the years, she dictated multiple books, including novels, poems, and religious texts. One of the most famous works attributed to her was a novel titled The Sorry Tale, which told the story of the life of Christ in such detail that many believed it to be a historical masterpiece. The book was written in an archaic style, full of biblical imagery and language, yet Pearl was not known to have any deep religious knowledge or interest before her encounters with patients. What made the case of Patience Worth even more perplexing was the consistency of the voice. Whether it was through the Ouija board or directly through Pearl's speech, Patience's tone and style remained the same. The stories she told were rich with character and emotion, filled with the wisdom of someone who had lived through centuries of experience. People were captivated by the idea that such a spirit could have survived the passage of time and found a way to communicate through a modern woman like Pearl. Despite the fascination surrounding the case, it also raised many questions. Some believed that Pearl was suffering from a form of dissociative identity disorder, or that she was somehow channeling forgotten knowledge from her subconscious. Others thought that it was possible Pearl had a natural gift for storytelling that had been dormant until she found a way to access it through the spiritual connection with Patience. However, none of these explanations seemed to account for the depth of historical and literary knowledge displayed in Patience's works. Scholars who studied the writings were baffled by how someone with Pearl's limited background could produce such sophisticated material. Her husband, Pearl Curran, who supported her throughout the process, was equally mystified. He was certain that his wife was not capable of inventing such elaborate stories on her own. As the years went on, the case of Patience Worth continued to be a subject of both debate and admiration. Pearl became somewhat of a celebrity, attracting attention from writers, theologians, and psychologists who all wanted to unlock the mystery of Patience. Some even believed that Pearl had a direct line to the afterlife, proving that the spirit world could indeed communicate with the living. In the years following her initial contact with Patience, Pearl's life changed dramatically. What had begun as a simple experiment with a Ouija board had turned into a full-blown literary career, although Pearl herself often expressed bewilderment at the entire situation. She never claimed to be a medium or a prophet. She simply believed that she had somehow become a vessel for Patience Worth's voice. Many people who witnessed the phenomenon firsthand walked away with more questions than answers. Some were convinced that they had encountered a genuine case of spirit communication, while others remained skeptical, believing there must be a rational explanation for what was happening. However, no one could deny the extraordinary nature of the case. As Pearl grew older, her connection with Patience began to fade. By the time she passed away in 1937, the spirit's voice had grown quieter, though her legacy continued to live on in the writings she had dictated. To this day, the case of Patience Worth remains one of the most intriguing and mysterious events in the history of spiritualism. Some see it as proof that the human mind is capable of far more than we understand, while others hold it as a testament to the existence of a world beyond our own. Whatever the truth may be, the story of Pearl Curran and Patience Worth is one that continues to fascinate, leaving us to wonder, could the voice of the past truly speak through the present? And if so, what other secrets might be waiting to be uncovered? As the years passed, the case of Patience Worth continued to captivate scholars, spiritualists, and skeptics alike. Many sought to disprove the phenomenon, while others believed it to be undeniable proof of spirit communication. Despite numerous investigations, no one could fully explain how Pearl, a woman of average education, could produce such sophisticated literature, especially with archaic language and historical accuracy that baffled even the most knowledgeable historians. In 1916, Pearl Curran published The Sorry Tale, a nearly 400,000-word novel dictated by Patience Worth. The book, set during the time of Christ, was filled with vivid, biblical imagery and intricate details that Pearl could not have known, further fueling public fascination. Pearl also dictated several other novels, poems, and plays, all attributed to Patience. Despite this literary success, Pearl herself remained humble. She insisted she was merely a vessel for Patience, never claiming credit for the work. She often said that she had no idea where the stories came from and described the experience as if someone else was guiding her hand and voice. By the late 1920s, as interest in spiritualism waned, the public began to lose interest in Patience Worth. Pearl's health began to decline, and by the time of her death in 1937, the voice of Patience had grown silent. Today, the mystery of Patience Worth remains unsolved. Whether Pearl Curran was channeling the spirit of a long-dead woman or tapping into some hidden part of her own mind, we may never know. But the legacy of Patience Worth endures, reminding us of the mysteries of the human mind and the possibility of a world beyond our own.